Chapter 1531. And on the other side, Feng Luan stepped on the main vine that was like an ancient and savage dragon, rushing towards Luo Qingtong. This time, she would definitely kill her opponent. Tong tong. Seeing this scene, Yu Huang's eyes instantly shrunk. At the same time, rumble rumble rumble. Outer space. In a remote and desolate continent, that was an unknown distance away from the Sky Spill continent. Countless bolts of lightning flashed and thunder roared. They were like blood-red saber lights that fiercely cleaved through the skies of this desolate continent. At the very center of the continent, a silver figure was faintly discernible as it floated amidst a storm of lightning and thunder. Pung pung pung. Terrifying bolts of lightning came crashing down from the sky like a torrential downpour. It was like the Milky Way was falling from the heavens, shattering the vast skies. And not too far away from this continent, Beijing and Feather Wind were anxiously looking at this desolate continent. This storm of lightning has already continued for a full 7 days and 7 nights. Damn it! Does the heavenly Tao want Master to die so badly? Beijing gripped her fists, looking at the most concentrated point of the desolate continent in front of her. That was where Yi Qianxian was. After the two of them brought Yi Qianxian here in the form of a young fox, they were able to withstand the barrage of thunder and lightning at the start. But towards the end, they were completely unable to do so and were forced out. At this time, Yi Qianxian was the only one resisting the endless barrage of thunder. This level of lightning attack, if it wasn't Yi Qianren who was inside, but any other expert in this star field, they would have been blasted to pieces by this incomparably dense thunder and lightning. The two of them were filled with worry. The heavenly Tao clearly didn't want their master to succeed in extending his life. The further the thunder and lightning went, the fiercer the attack became. A casual attack like this was enough to pierce through a low-level continent like the Sky Spill continent. Luckily, they had brought their master away from the Sky Spill continent in time. Otherwise, if their master couldn't display his strength, there would be no way for him to resist this barrage of thunder and lightning. As the two of them were thinking this, there was a sudden hum. The barrage of thunder and lightning in front of them suddenly stopped. Did it work? The two of them were pleasantly surprised. However, before they could smile, in that instant bang, an extremely terrifying aura filled the air. They looked at the dense barrage of thunder and lightning in front of them and opened a path. Immediately thereafter, an extremely thick pillar of purplish-black lightning came crashing down from the heavens, threatening to encompass the entirety of the abandoned continent up ahead. At the very center of this pillar of thunder, a flickering white dot flashed. An incomparably frightening aura that seemed capable of destroying the entire region was emitted from it. World-extinguishing God Thunder? Seeing this incomparably powerful and terrifying pillar of thunder come crashing down, Beijing and Wind Feather felt their hearts tighten. Master! Just as the two of them cried out in alarm, with a loud bang, countless bolts of thunder and lightning wrapped around a single point. A ball of silver light suddenly burst open. Chapter 1532. Rumble rumble rumble. Yi Qianxian's eyes were ice cold as he looked at the heavenly punishment that came crashing down from the heavens. There wasn't the slightest ripple of emotion on his handsome face. He lifted his hand and blasted out an attack. Heaven-conquering art annihilation. As the man's cold voice resounded through the skies, a blood-red light flashed from the man's sleeves. With a bang, an incomparably stunning saber light shot out from the man's fluttering silver sleeves. In an instant, it cut through the wilderness and extinguished all light. Pung! That terrifying pillar of lightning that could almost turn the abandoned continent beneath Yi Qianxian into dust was instantly annihilated by Yi Qianxian's move. The entire world seemed to wail and tremble under this attack. The incomparably thick pillar of lightning shattered with a loud bang. In the endless void, there seemed to be something that was hatefully flying away. Yi Qianxian's figure stood between the heavens and earth. His eyes seemed to contain countless saber lights and blood swords. He coldly stared at the void, as if he wanted to peer into the depths of the endless void. Master! Beijing and Feng Yu rushed to Yi Qianxian's side, their faces filled with joy and surprise. Master, did you succeed in extending your life? Yi Qianxian withdrew his gaze. He stood in the starry sky with his hands clasped behind his back, sensing the situation within his body. He had indeed succeeded in extending his life. The strength of his meridians had increased by a great deal. It was enough for him to support himself for another 3 years. Unfortunately, even if he had absorbed all the power of the heavenly fox's blood essence, it was only enough for him to send out an attack that was comparable to his peak state. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to just shatter the world-extinguishing thunder. Yi Qianxian's eyes were cold. He flicked his sleeves and said, "Let's go." He had left the Sky Spill continent for so long. It was time to return. I wonder how that woman is doing in the far west wilderness. Thinking of the enemies Luo Qingtong had provoked in the far west wilderness, Yi Qianxian slightly frowned. He didn't know why, but he had an uneasy feeling. He hoped that nothing would happen to that woman. As Yi Qianxian and the others disappeared, the surrounding heaven and earth spirit qi began to calm down. At this moment, a group of figures suddenly rushed in from the front. I clearly sensed an extremely powerful and terrifying aura here just now. How come it's gone now? The strength of this group of people was extremely powerful. With their arrival, the surrounding heaven and earth spirit qi started to boil again. One of them, a middle-aged man who looked to be about 40 years old, glanced at the scene in front of him. He immediately frowned and asked doubtfully, "Maybe I sense wrongly?" Someone beside him said, "Impossible." The middle-aged man said, "It's fine if I was the only one who sensed it wrong, but you guys sensed it too." This was definitely the first time a group of people had sensed wrongly. The middle-aged man's expression was grave. At this moment, a voice sounded out from behind him. "Whether or not we sense wrongly, we'll know once we take a look." As he spoke, a young girl wearing a jade-green robe walked out from behind him. Her beautiful eyes swept over the scene in front of her. The young girl looked to be about 17 or 18 years old. Her eyebrows were thin, and her lips were pink. Her figure was slender and elegant, and her face carried a bit of beauty and nobility. As she walked out from behind, the group of people quickly bowed. Chapter 1533. The girl nodded and took out a mirror that seemed to be carved out of ice. The mirror was inlaid with extremely complicated and gorgeous patterns. The aura it exuded was very powerful. It was obviously not an ordinary item. The girl raised her hand and shone the mirror at the scene in front of her. In the blink of an eye, many images were revealed within it. Yi Qianming, Bei Qing, and Feng Yu's figures were revealed. The girl's eyes lit up when she saw Yi Qianming's face. At this moment, the ice mirror in her hand shattered with a bang. The scene of Yi Qianming resisting the divine thunder of annihilation was too powerful. The mirror could not show it at all. The power within had exceeded the limit of what it could bear. The girl was caught off guard and was pushed back by the power of the ice mirror. Eldest Miss. A group of strong cultivators rushed forward to support her, but she waved her hand and stopped them. "I'm fine." The girl's eyes were burning as she looked at the place where the ice mirror had shattered. The ice mirror was a gift from her father on her 16th birthday. It was definitely not an ordinary item. Now, it had shattered when she peeked at the scene in front of her. The man in the scene in front of her was definitely unfathomable. The extremely powerful and terrifying power that they had sensed just now might have been caused by him. The girl's eyes lit up as she thought about it. She looked at the shattered mirror in front of her and ordered, "Check the background of that man. Check over there." As she spoke, she pointed in the direction where Yi Qianming and the others had left. "Yes." A group of strong cultivators hurriedly responded. They followed the girl and naturally knew how precious and powerful the ice mirror in her hand was. It shattered after just one look. The strength of the man revealed by the ice mirror was definitely beyond their imagination. If they could find such a person, they would naturally try their best to rope him in. But the eldest miss seemed to have other thoughts about him. This was a little troublesome. The eldest miss had an engagement with the first miss. Everyone had a subtle look in their eyes as they thought about it, but they did not say anything. After all, this was the eldest miss's personal matter. What's more, that man's strength was so powerful that even if the young miss fell in love with him, it wouldn't be impossible. It's just that I'm afraid it won't be easy to explain to them. And at the Sky Spill continent, St. King Tomb. Luo Qingtong looked at the scene of Feng Yuan controlling the main vine, and suddenly narrowed her eyes. The attack she had been brewing in her hand suddenly blasted out. Heaven-conquering art. As the tyrannical sword light swept out, with a bang, the huge vine controlled by Feng Yuan let out a sharp shriek, as it retreated a few dozen meters. However, its body didn't suffer too much damage. The blood energy and death energy it absorbed were too powerful. It wasn't just the blood energy and death energy of the Ouyang family, but also the power of the wriggling bloody remains. The strength of the main vine of the blood-colored demonic vine had been raised to an extremely terrifying level. Under such circumstances, even if Luo Qingtong absorbed the power of the Saint King's soul in the heart of the 1,000-year soul-guiding tree, it wouldn't pose any hindrance. Chapter 1534. Luo Qingtong looked at this scene and slightly narrowed her eyes. At this moment, Yu Sihuang's figure appeared beside her. Let's go, Tong Tong, I'll send you out. He stretched out his hand towards Luo Qingtong. Yu Sihuang naturally has a life-saving secret method to leave this place. However, that secret method can only be used once in a short period of time, and can only send one person out at a time. After sending off Luo Qingtong, Yu Sihuang himself has no way to leave. However, he is not prepared to let Luo Qingtong know about this. No need. Looking at Yu Sihuang's outstretched hand, Luo Qingtong frowned. Although she doesn't know what the other party wants to do, but if Yu Sihuang really has a way to leave this place easily, she is afraid that he would have used it long ago. Dragging it out until now, she is afraid that the consumption of that method is not small, and the damage to Yu Sihuang is also very big. Most importantly, if she leaves, what will happen to Su Yu and the others? Will they all die here? She brought them in, so she naturally has to bring them all out. No one can think of snatching them from her hands. Luo Qingtong's eyes were cold. She avoided Yu Sihuang's hand, and raised her hand to attack several times, attacking the main vine in front of her. Boom boom boom. That main vine was blasted back violently. Feng Yuan was so angry that her face turned white. She doesn't believe that Luo Qingtong can continuously attack like this. The opponent's strength must be limited. No matter how heaven-defying the opportunity in this Saint King's tomb is, it is impossible to raise her strength to such a powerful level in such a short period of time. She must have used some tricks. She is waiting to see when she will reveal her true colors. At that time, she will definitely die without a burial place. And Luo Qingtong, after blasting out those few attacks, suddenly leaped and appeared beside Su Yu and the others. Do you want to live? She raised her hand and attacked, shattering the remains of the blood-red vines that were wriggling towards the people from the various families and forces. The latter and the others were desperately resisting the attacks of the vines. When they saw Luo Qingtong's actions and heard her question, they were stunned. Soon, someone realized what was going on. Yes, we want to live. How could these people not want to live? If it wasn't for the fact that they wanted to survive, they wouldn't have been forced by Feng Yuan to swear allegiance to the Ouyang family. As a result, the Ouyang clan's people had all died without a complete corpse. These people had become nutrients for the blood-colored vines. They were truly helpless. Seeing that Luo Qingtong seemed to have the intention to save them, the group hurriedly responded. All right. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes coldly at them. Swear your loyalty to me, and I will save you. The blood-red light in her eyes flickered violently. If someone could see the depths of Luo Qingtong's eyes at this moment, they would be shocked to discover that the entire exit hall, and even the three-dimensional image of the Saint King's tomb, was presented in Luo Qingtong's eyes, constantly rotating and evolving. All right, the people from the various families and forces did not hesitate to delay. They had already sold themselves and the others to the Ouyang family once before. So what if they sold themselves and the others to Luo Qingtong again? As for whether the young man was lying to them, they were about to lose their lives. Who would care about that? Moreover, even if the other party was lying to them, it was meaningless. Chapter 1535. It was with this thought in mind that the people from the various families and forces answered quickly. At this time, They were very glad that they had pledged their loyalty to the Ouyang family. Now that the Ouyang family's people were all dead, they could be considered free. Otherwise, if they had sold to Feng Yuan, they would have ended up worse than the Ouyang family's people. They would have already become fertilizer. The group of people hurriedly pledged their loyalty. At this time, Yu Sihuang also rushed to Luo Qingtong's side. Tong Tong Yu Sihuang, do me a favor. Luo Qingtong looked at him. Help me block Feng Yuan for 300 breaths of time. Only Yu Sihuang alone could possibly block the main vine's attack. Luo Qingtong needed time. 300 breaths? Yu Sihuang looked deeply at Luo Qingtong, then nodded. Okay. He didn't ask anything. Nor did he say anything. He simply turned around and left. 300 breaths of time. As long as he didn't die, he wouldn't miss a single breath of time. Looking at Yu Sihuang's figure leaving, Luo Qingtong looked at the group of people who had already pledged their loyalty to Su Yu and the others. Next, you all listen to my orders. Boom! Yu Sihuang's figure rushed towards the blood-colored vine that was once again exploding towards this side. On top of the vine, Feng Yuan looked at the situation where Luo Qingtong turned around and returned to Su Yu and the others. Inexplicably, he had a bad premonition in his heart. Although he felt that Luo Qingtong was bound to be doomed this time. After all, this vine had been stimulated to the extreme by her. Unless the Saint King powerhouse in this Saint King's tomb came back from the dead, no one here would be its opponent. Under such circumstances, Luo Qingtong and the others were bound to die. But Feng Yuan had suffered too much in the hands of Luo Qingtong before. He didn't dare to lower his guard against the other party. Therefore, even if he didn't think that Luo Qingtong had any chance to turn the tables, after seeing Luo Qingtong's strange actions, he still rushed over regardless of everything. Get lost. Seeing Yu Sihuang rushing towards him, Feng Yuan's eyes flashed fiercely. He directly controlled the blood-colored vine under his feet and fiercely whipped towards Yu Sihuang's direction. Boom! That tyrannical and terrifying power directly shook the space in midair, creating ripples that were several feet wide. Especially the surrounding spiritual qi. It was like a huge wave that violently surged up layer by layer. Then, along with the huge body of the blood-colored vine, it violently attacked towards Yu Sihuang. Looking at the violent power rushing towards him, Yu Sihuang's face turned gloomy. 300 breaths of time. He abruptly raised his hand, and in an instant, a few golden needles with a cold gleam appeared between his 5 fingers. He pierced them into the Baihui acupoint on the top of his head. Golden needle empowerment. As the golden needles pierced into his body, the aura in his body instantly soared, and he rushed towards the blood-colored vine's attack. Boom, boom, boom. A man and a vine quickly clashed together. On the other side, Luo Qingtong's arrangement was almost complete. Stand still. Everyone, don't move a single step. Chapter 1536. Beneath their feet, there were winding lines. Luo Qingtong's figure shuttled between the crowd. A huge inscription pattern that almost enveloped everyone slowly took shape. Wang. As the inscription pattern became more and more perfect, the heaven and earth spiritual qi in the air seemed to have sensed something and faintly began to boil and jump. Feeling this movement, Feng Yuan, who was entangled with Yu Sihuang, suddenly raised his head and looked towards Luo Qingtong's direction. His eyes instantly congealed. Damn it! That evil Dr. Guitong really had some tricks up his sleeve. Looking at the huge inscription pattern on the ground, Feng Yuan fiercely clenched his teeth and no longer cared about anything else. Explode! She let out a stern shout. In an instant, Yu Sihuang felt that the aura of the main vine in front of him was not right. In the next second, a violent explosion sound rang out. It was Feng Yuan who detonated a part of the main vine's body. The tyrannical and terrifying power that escaped from the main vine caught Yu Sihuang off guard. Boom, boom, boom. Yu Sihuang's figure was sent flying. At the same time, Feng Yuan also controlled the huge main vine and quickly flew towards Luo Qingtong and the others. Evil Dr. Guitong, I want you to die. At this moment, Luo Qingtong was only a few lines away from completing the huge inscription pattern. Seeing Feng Yuan's figure flying over, Luo Qingtong's brows slightly wrinkled. At this moment there was a loud boom. An attack suddenly flew out from behind and exploded on the main vine. The impact caused the main vine's figure to suddenly stop in midair for a moment. Cough cough. 300 breaths of time, is it enough? Behind the main vine, Yu Huang's figure was barely supporting himself to stand there. The explosion just now had injured him quite badly. At this moment, he was covering his mouth with one hand. Blood was dripping from the gaps between his fingers. His devilishly charming face paled, making his crimson robes seem even redder than blood. Enough! Looking at Yu Huang's current appearance, Luo Qingtong's complexion became heavy to the extreme. She drew the last line and raised her hand to summon the life and death yin-yang sword. Then she thrust it down. Spirit summoning array rise! Following Luo Qingtong's shout, the entire inscription pattern lit up. Luo Qingtong's voice was cold. Infuse power. As her voice rang out, the people that she had arranged to stand on the nodes of the inscription patterns immediately moved in a hurry. They poured the power that they had already prepared into the line that they were standing on. As the power poured in, the entire inscription pattern started to spin. His speed was getting faster and faster. Boom boom boom. As the inscription pattern started to spin, the entire Saint King's tomb started to tremble. The trembling became more and more intense. Then with a loud boom, an extremely powerful consciousness suddenly appeared on the huge inscription pattern. The spirit of the Saint King's tomb. Looking at the appearance of the huge spirit of the Saint King's tomb, everyone's eyes widened in an instant. Chapter 1537. At this time, Feng Wuan controlled the huge main vine to rush in front of Luo Qingtong and the others. However, the moment when it was blocked by Yu Huang, Luo Qingtong had already completed the inscription lines. Now that she rushed over, what greeted her was the huge spirit of the Holy King's tomb. Under the summoning of Luo Qingtong's spirit summoning array, the consciousness spirit of the glorious underground palace appeared at once. Then it fiercely collided with her, who was controlling the blood-colored demonic vine. Boom boom boom! The two huge creatures collided. In an instant, the huge blood-colored vine was bombarded into pieces amidst a sharp ear-piercing sound. After all, this was its home ground, but the spirit of the Holy King's tomb was its home ground. The main vine of the blood-colored demonic vine had absorbed its power before, so it was naturally suppressed by it. On the blood-colored vine, Feng Wuan's beautiful face turned pale. She could feel the main blood-colored vine under her feet shattering. If this continued, the main blood-colored vine would definitely not be able to hold on. At that time, it would be Luo Qingtong's turn to kill her. Thinking so, Feng Wuan suddenly couldn't care about anything else. She hurriedly controlled the broken main blood-colored vine to leave. Looking at her preparing to flee, Luo Qingtong's eyes were cold. She raised her hand, and in an instant, the life and death sword inserted in the center of the array was held in her hand. This life and death sword had absorbed a lot of power from the spirit of the Holy King's tomb. Now that it was held in Luo Qingtong's palm, it was boiling hot. At the same time, in Luo Qingtong's hand, the heart of the thousand-year soul guiding would had also absorbed a lot of power from the spirit of the Holy King's tomb. At this moment, the strands of power were overflowing from it. Holding these two things, Luo Qingtong's figure suddenly shot up and swept towards Feng Wuan. Take Yu Huang and leave first. As Luo Qingtong spoke, she slashed out with her sword. Heaven-conquering art. In an instant, the entire exit hall seemed to be illuminated by this sword light. Savage Eternity, Heaven Desolation Sword. Boom boom boom. As the sword slashed out, the entire exit hall and the tomb were on the verge of collapse. The power Luo Qingtong was using at this moment came from the spirit of the glorious underground palace of the Sage King's tomb. This kind of power was terrifying. At the same time, it could easily destroy the material of the tomb. Countless pieces of rubble fell down. At the same time, Luo Qingtong's sword light also slashed on the broken main vine of the blood demon vine. Then, the tail of the sword fiercely swept towards Feng Wuan, who was at the top of the vine. Looking at the sword slashing towards him, Feng Wuan's heart was in a panic. Luo Qingtong's sword light contained the power of the spirit of the Holy King's tomb. and this blood demon vine couldn't resist it at all. Right at this moment, the consciousness of the green smoke suddenly surged out and took over her body. Idiot! The blue smoke was suppressed back into the depths of Feng Wuan's consciousness by the sudden madness before, and only now did it break free. Seeing this scene, he suddenly shouted out, and then fiercely shouted, "Explode!" As his voice sounded, in an instant, the entire main vine of the blood demon vine exploded. The powerful explosive force blocked Luo Qingtong's sword light. Chapter 1538. Feng Wuan covered her face. A huge wound was drawn on her face. The wound was drawn directly from her left brow bone to her right face, and then to her entire neck and chest. The white bones, flesh, and fat inside could all be seen. Feng Wuan screamed miserably, and her whole body fell from the sky. Luo Qingtong was about to blast out another attack to kill her. Rumble! The entire exit hall collapsed at this moment. The explosion of the blood demon vine and the bombardment of Luo Qingtong's sword light just now had forcibly collapsed this already crumbling exit hall. At the same time, the entire Holy King's tomb also had a loud bang. All the passageways and rooms collapsed in an instant. This Holy King's tomb palace collapsed. Master! Su Yu and others just came out through the teleportation array and were about to wait outside the Holy King's tomb for Luo Qingtong to come out. As a result, when they turned around, they heard a thunderous roar and were suddenly stunned. Then they rushed to the entrance of the Holy King's tomb like crazy. However, the Holy King's tomb palace collapsed, and the entire entrance was destroyed. They couldn't find a place to go in at all. Master! Standing on a collapsed wilderness open space, Su Yu and others' voices were sorrowful. In the Holy King's tomb, Luo Qingtong felt the underground palace collapse, and suddenly her eyes narrowed. In an instant, she swept the surrounding scene, and then leaped. Bang! Her palm slammed somewhere in the main hall, and in an instant her feet were empty, and her whole person disappeared from the main hall. Then with a rumble, the entire Holy King's tomb palace collapsed. Cough cough. Luo Qingtong fell into a space, and it was dark all around. She raised her hand to wave away the smoke and dust that filled the air, and then looked up, her eyes flashing with blood, looking at the scene in front of her. This is the secret room that the Holy King's soul mentioned? Luo Qingtong looked around. This was a square room, and the place was not very big. The decorations were very simple. There was a stone table, a stone stool, and a stone bed. There was a brocade box on the stone table. Luo Qingtong walked over, picked it up, and opened it. There was a map neatly stacked inside. Map. Luo Qingtong looked at the map and her eyes lit up. She thought of the map of the land of the fallen immortals that the Saint King's soul had mentioned. Was this the map? Luo Qingtong picked it up, looked at it carefully, and put it into her waist ring. She then discovered that there were a few other things in the brocade box. Among them, there was a gold and iron token, a brass key, and a secret manual. Luo Qingtong took out the secret book and discovered that it was a saint-level cultivation method. The cultivation method recorded in it was enough to let Luo Qingtong advance to the saint realm in the future, all the way to the venerable realm with twice the result with half the effort. At the same time, it also recorded a variety of cultivation methods for the various realms above the saint realm. Luo Qingtong looked at the secret manual and laughed. This secret manual was most likely the treasure of the Holy King realm expert. Otherwise, it would not be placed here so cautiously. It was probably waiting for the day when he was reborn, and then he would cultivate again. Chapter 1539. But even so, it was of great use to Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong put it away, and then looked at the other two things. She picked up the golden iron token, and saw the words Star Alliance engraved on the front and Elder engraved on the back. She immediately raised her eyebrows slightly. Star Alliance, where is that? Luo Qingtong looked at the token and decided to put it away first. What if it came in handy in the future? In any case, it was an Elder's token. Finally, Luo Qingtong looked at the brass key. Luo Qingtong's eyes swept around for a while and determined that there couldn't be any hidden mechanisms in this secret room. Suddenly, holding the brass key felt a little strange. Forget it, I'll put it all away first. Since it was placed here by that Saint King realm expert, it must be something very important to him. Luo Qingtong didn't want to lose her treasure just because she threw it away casually. Thinking of this, she immediately put away the brass key. After putting away all these things, Luo Qingtong began to look around, looking for a way out. The exit and the entrance of this secret room didn't seem to be the same. Moreover, when Luo Qingtong came in, the entire Saint King Tomb Palace had collapsed. This secret room was unscathed, so it was obvious that it wasn't in the underground palace. And the passageway was completely sealed after she came in, so the collapse of the underground palace didn't affect it. Then it should have another way out. As Luo Qingtong thought about it, she immediately started searching around the secret chamber. Fortunately, her pair of blood-red eyes could see in the dark. Otherwise, in such a pitch-black room, unless it was an expert above the Saint realm, with a clear mind, and could use divine sense to look outside, who could see what was in this secret room, let alone find a way out? Luo Qingtong thought so, and suddenly her heart moved slightly. Wait! Clear mind! Saint realm? Luo Qingtong seemed to have grasped something. The saint ruler must have prepared this secret room for himself. The other party was a Saint King realm cultivator, and after being reincarnated, he could directly enter the saint realm. In other words, the way out of this secret room should be prepared for experts above the sage realm. Moreover, it was tailor-made for that Saint King realm master. As Luo Qingtong thought of this, she had a vague guess. Her eyes flickered as she carefully looked around. Soon, she realized that there was something wrong with the wall opposite her. Luo Qingtong walked over and released her mental strength. Soon, she discovered that there seemed to be a faint suction force coming from the wall. The suction force was very weak, but it did exist. Luo Qingtong's expression changed slightly. She raised her hand and placed her palm on it. At the same time, she channeled her power and activated her ocular technique. Soon she discovered that there seemed to be an array hidden inside, and that array couldn't be activated by ordinary power. It had to be the power of that Saint King realm master, and it had to be above the saint realm, and it had to be his own power. If Luo Qingtong used the power in the heart of the 1,000-year-old soul guiding wood, circulated it in her body, and then released it, this wall wouldn't recognize it. This was a bit of a trap. Luo Qingtong frowned. She had the power of that Saint King realm master, but she hadn't reached the saint realm. Didn't that mean that she wouldn't be able to leave until she reached the saint stage? Chapter 1540. Bang! A figure suddenly pounced out from behind her. Luo Qingtong felt a sense of danger. The bloody light in her eyes flickered rapidly. She leaned to one side and dodged the figure that rushed over. The moment she dodged, the figure suddenly turned around and flew towards her again. The speed was very fast. At the same time, the powerful aura that exploded in the air was very terrifying. However, at this time, Luo Qingtong raised her hand to summon the life and death yin-yang sword as she retreated. At the same time, the heart of the 1,000-year-old soul guiding wood was in her hand. The light in her eyes suddenly turned cold. She raised her hand and slashed forward. Heaven-conquering art. As Luo Qingtong slashed with her sword, the black figure that was almost as tall as a person was instantly sent flying by her. At the same time, Luo Qingtong's figure rushed out in an instant and caught up with the black figure that was sent flying by her. She suddenly raised her sword and slashed. Boom! The life and death yin-yang sword in her hand nailed the black figure in an instant. In the blink of an eye, the black shadow let out an extremely sharp and resounding shriek before falling completely still. Bang! Luo Qingtong raised her hand and put away the life and death yin-yang sword in her hand. Only then did she see the appearance of the black figure clearly. It was a small section of the main vine of the blood-red vine that Feng Wuan had controlled. It was constantly wriggling on the ground, trying to get up again. However, the life and death yin-yang sword in Luo Qingtong's hand was the best at restraining the death energy. The blood and death energy in its body had been completely absorbed when the life and death yin-yang sword entered its body. It wriggled for a while, and then stopped moving completely. This small section of the main vine should have fallen together with Luo Qingtong, when she fell into the secret chamber. If it was someone else, they might have fallen for the sudden attack just now. Luo Qingtong looked at the small section of the main vine indifferently. She turned around and prepared to continue studying the wall. At this moment, Little Pig's voice suddenly resounded in her mind. Wait! Look at the blood-red flower on its head. That's the flower of the Holy Land. These blood-colored vines are actually blood phantom vines. Haha! No wonder Feng Yuan wanted to set up a trap here. It turns out that it was to nurture this Saint Realm flower. Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows when she heard Little Pig's voice. Holy Realm flower? She looked at the tip of the blood-red vine and saw a blood-red flower bud. The blood-red flower bud had already swelled to a certain extent, and the petals around it were faintly showing signs of blooming. A small opening had already appeared in the middle. But now, after Luo Qingtong completely destroyed the small section of the main vine, the blood-colored flower bud was slowly withering without the support of blood qi and death qi. If it wasn't for Little Pig's reminder, Luo Qingtong wouldn't have noticed it. Yes, at this moment, Little Pig had recovered from his weakened state. He jumped out of Luo Qingtong's sleeve and pointed at the blood-red flower. This is the Saint Realm flower. It was born from the essence of countless martial artists. After you consume it, you will immediately break through to the Saint Realm. I didn't expect Feng Yuan to have such a good thing. Chapter 1541. Little Pig curled his lips and said, If you hadn't obtained the map of the Saint Monarch's tomb, everyone who entered this tomb would have turned into fertilizer for this Saint Realm flower and become a part of Feng Yuan's strength. At that time, not only would she be able to break through to the Saint Realm without any hindrance, she might even be able to directly advance to the Saint Realm with the help of the huge energy essence. After all, there were so many experts from various families and forces who came to the Saint Monarch's tomb. No one was a match for the fully grown blood phantom vine. If it weren't for Luo Qingtong, Feng Yuan could casually kill half of the people here. The energy essence contained in the blood-colored flower would be huge enough. Luo Qingtong finally understood the use of this blood-colored flower. But this flower looks like it's about to wither. Can it still be saved? Luo Qingtong frowned. If she knew this flower was a Saint Realm flower, she wouldn't have been so heavy-handed just now. Now that this blood-colored flower was about to wither before it even bloomed, the blood-colored energy essence inside could no longer be used. Hee. Little Pig laughed when he heard this. If it were someone else, of course it wouldn't be saved. After all, this blood-colored flower grows with the energy of blood and death. But you're different, Little Pig said as he pointed at the life and death sword in Luo Qingtong's hand with his little hoof. Use this to transform into the form of the death blade, and let it absorb the energy of death. Then cut some blood to feed it. There won't be a problem. After all, this blood-colored flower was about to bloom. There was only one step left. With the energy of death contained in the death blade of the life and death blade, and the power of Luo Qingtong's blood essence, there was absolutely no problem. Otherwise, Little Pig wouldn't have hurriedly called out to Luo Qingtong after seeing this blood-colored flower. Naturally, the other party had to be able to save him. Okay. Luo Qingtong's eyes shone brightly. If she could save this Saint Realm flower and consume it, she would be able to break through to the Saint Realm and leave the secret chamber. Su Yu and the others were still waiting for her outside. They didn't know that she was fine. At that time, there would definitely be chaos. Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong immediately cut her wrist and dripped her blood on the flower bud. At the same time, the life and death yin-yang sword in her hand transformed into a death blade. The aura of death contained in it immediately excited the blood-colored flower. It desperately absorbed Luo Qingtong's blood and qi, as well as the qi of death emitted by the life and death sword. The petals around it opened little by little. While Luo Qingtong was feeding the blood-colored flower, outside, Su Yu and the others could not believe that Luo Qingtong had died just like that. They desperately dug at the collapsed palace of the sage monarch's tomb, trying to dig out the entrance. However, the palace of the sage monarch's tomb was nearly 1,000 meters underground. There was only a narrow entrance passage that extended several hundred meters to the surface. Under such circumstances, when the underground palace collapsed, the entrance passage was completely mixed with the surrounding sand and dust, no longer existing at all. Su Yu and the others knelt on the ground and dug for a long time, but they didn't manage to dig out anything. At this time, some of the people who had sworn allegiance to Luo Qingtong's family before the crisis of life and death were unwilling to do so. What the hell are you digging for? Chapter 1542. It's so deep and the tomb has collapsed. She must be dead. Let's go. There's no need to dig anymore. These people had chosen to pledge their loyalty to Luo Qingtong when they were in the Saint King's tomb and couldn't get any help from the heavens or the earth. Their loyalty was not very high. Moreover, now that the underground palace had collapsed, Luo Qingtong was already dead in their hearts. What was there to care about a dead person? Even if they had made an oath to heaven and earth. But after a person died, the oath to heaven and earth was invalid. Now there was no need for them to listen to Su Yu and the others. As these people thought so, many of them got up and threw away the weapons in their hands, preparing to leave. Some of them were still thinking disdainfully. You can't blame them for being ungrateful. Who asked Luo Qingtong not to have lived long and was unlucky? She had died just like that. Naturally, they would not continue to pledge their loyalty to her because of a dead person. If these people from family who wanted to dig, then let them dig. They would not accompany them. As these people thought so, they immediately got up and prepared to leave. Some of them even had designs on family, who Su Yu and the others. These people must have benefited a lot from following Yi Jiao and the king of the southern region. They must have obtained a lot of things from the Saint King's tomb. Now that the people from the southern region were unconscious because of Yu Sihuang's injury, they immediately left the Saint King's tomb. They did not know what had happened at all. They could totally kill Su Yu and the others. Then, they could push the matter to another place. Many people thought so, and suddenly they were very eager to make a move. Many pairs of eyes looked at Su Yu and the others with evil intentions. Looking at these people's eyes, Su Yu and the others, who were already very sad, were shocked and angry. These ingrates. Master should not have saved them before. Just as these people were about to attack Su Yu and the others with evil intentions. Bang bang bang. There was a series of muffled explosions. These people exploded into countless pieces in front of Su Yu and the others. Then, they quickly disappeared into thin air. Not even a trace of blood or flesh was left behind. This is the punishment of the heavenly Tao. They suddenly saw these people explode and die for no reason, and they were completely turned into ashes without a trace of flesh or flesh left behind. Everyone's faces were filled with shock, especially those people from the family clans and forces, who were also shaken and wanted to leave. They instantly froze. They did not attack Su Yu and the others, but they also wanted to leave and no longer be loyal to Luo Qingtong. In an instant, they sensed the arrival of the heavenly law. Cold sweat immediately appeared on everyone's faces. We were wrong. Wrong. We will no longer have any thoughts of betrayal. Please be merciful. Please, Master, please. Among those who wanted to attack Su Yu and the others, most of them were from the top family clans. Among them were a few family clan leaders. At this moment, all of them were turned into ashes in an instant. How would the remaining people dare to have any other thoughts? Immediately, the wavering thoughts in their hearts were forcibly suppressed, and they no longer dared to have any negative thoughts. Chapter 1543. On the other hand, Su Yu and the rest were pleasantly surprised. Master is fine. Everyone was almost crying tears of joy. Su Yu got up and wiped away the tears on her face. Let's go. Let's leave this place and find someone to save Master. Luo Qingtong was not dead. Master was in the underground palace. Su Yu and the rest were filled with emotions. There was no way they could stay here any longer. With their abilities, they would never be able to find a way to save Master from the underground palace. They had to leave immediately and head to the Black Field to ask Mingzun for help. If Mingzun helped, Master would definitely be fine. With this thought, everyone got up and prepared to leave. However, at this moment, a cold voice was suddenly heard from the front. Leave, Don't even think about leaving." As he spoke, a group of figures appeared in front of Su Yu and the rest. "Who are you people?" Su Yu and the rest looked at the group of people who appeared in front of them and instantly frowned. Especially Su Yu. She looked at the group of people in front of her and was very sure that they did not know them. Why did the other party suddenly appear and block their path? Humph! The group of people who appeared looked in the direction of Su Yu and the rest. One of the young men in green said coldly, "You don't have to care who we are. You just have to tell me where Yijio is." As he spoke, his gaze swept across the group and fixed on Su Yu. Or rather, it was fixed on the thunder beast in her arms. Thunder beast. Looking at the little purple beast in the arms of the cold youth, the young man's face darkened. "So it was you who took the things that I asked the Bai family to prepare? Speak. Where is the enlightened purple jade fruit?" This young man was the one who had rushed to Wild City previously. He had brought a group of people to Wild City to retrieve the enlightened purple jade fruit and the thunder beast that he had asked the Bai family to prepare. He had made thorough preparations for these two things. Unless the Bai clan was a pig, it was impossible for them to fail. However, when he arrived at Wildland City, he found out that the Bai family had already been destroyed by family who. The leader was a young man called Yijio. As for the Bai family's possessions, they should have all fallen into the hands of the other party. This time, the young man flew into a rage. The purple jade mine fruit and the thunder beast were things that he had set up a long time ago. They were of great use to him. That lightning beast in particular was something he had prepared for that person. Now that it had been snatched away by someone else, how could he tolerate it? After asking about the whereabouts of Luo Qingtong and the others, he immediately rushed over. Now that he saw the little thunder beast in Su Yu's arms, his heart immediately calmed down. With a whoosh, an extremely powerful and frightening power suddenly emerged from his body. In an instant it enveloped Su Yu family who, and the people from the family forces. "Speak. Where is Yijio?" "The enlightened purple jade fruit must be in the hands of the other party." The young man's voice was cold and filled with murderous intent. In an instant, the expressions of Su Yu and the others changed abruptly, especially the people from the family forces. They looked at the young man, who was at most 30 years old, in shock. "Holy Master!" Chapter 1544. It had to be known that in the Sky Spill continent, a saint was already considered a peak powerhouse. The Hua family head, the Ouyang family head, and the others were all saints. But how long had they been cultivating? How long had this young man been cultivating? What shocked them even more was that after the young man's aura erupted, the group of young men and women behind him all released their auras. Saint Realm. Saint Realm. Beyond the Saint Realm, there was no one below the Saint Realm. Most importantly, these people looked to be no more than 20 years old. A 20-year-old Saint Realm powerhouse. So many. The people from the family forces were all horrified. Su Yu and the others from the heavenly diabolism knew that this young man was the one mentioned by Bai Jintang before. The powerhouse from the hidden world that the Bai family had hooked up with. It was a Saint Master powerhouse. And there were so many Saint Realm powerhouses by his side. Su Yu and the others felt their hearts turn cold. It wasn't because of the bad situation they were about to face, but for Luo Qingtong, who was still in the underground palace. Nothing could happen to them. Otherwise, who would inform the Black Field to come and save Master? Su Yu made a prompt decision. "Go. Scatter and leave immediately. Those who are alive, go to the Black Field immediately and don't look back." Following her shout, the lightning beast in her arms instantly flew up into the air. Its figure became extremely large in an instant. It roared wildly and tore at the young man's power. The thunder beast was one of the most ferocious and powerful saint beasts. It had already advanced to the saint realm, and its strength soared when it went crazy. Although it was only temporary, and it might not be a match for this saint master, but it was enough to tear apart the opponent's power and restore Su Yu and the others' freedom. Humph! You think you can be so arrogant just because you have a thunder beast? I'm afraid you haven't seen a true beast taming technique. The young man sneered. He suddenly raised his hand, and a seal formed in his hand. That seal was very strange. It was filled with all kinds of demonic beast patterns. As soon as the beast spell was formed, the young man waved his hand, and the beast spell entered the body of the thunder beast in front of him. After doing all this, the young man crossed his arms and sneered, waiting for the lightning beast to lose control and escape from the other party's control. Even though they didn't know what the other party was relying on to command the lightning beasts, once their beast-taming King Valley used their beast-taming art, the other party's orders would immediately lose their effect. Wanting to use lightning beasts to deal with them, the other party was really wrong. The thing that their beast-taming King Valley feared the least was demonic beasts. However, just as he was thinking about this, he suddenly heard a roar. Then, with a tearing sound, the net of aura that enveloped Suyu and the others was torn apart. What? The sneer on the young man's face froze. As he watched his aura shroud being torn apart, his heart was filled with indescribable disbelief. How was this possible? To think that he hadn't taken control of the other party's lightning beast. Could it be that the other party's beast-taming technique was of a higher level than his? How was this possible? How could there be a beast-taming technique that was of a higher level than their beast-taming King Valley's beast-taming technique? Chapter 1545. As the young man thought about it, the way he looked at Suyu changed. After Suyu had the lightning beast tear through the opponent's aura, she shouted, "Let's go!" Following her shout, the group of people from the Hu clan and the other clans and forces did not dare to delay. Immediately, they desperately mobilized the strength in their bodies and ran out. However, as soon as they moved, a roar that sounded like a dragon's roar and a tiger's roar sounded around them. At that instant, several enormous figures appeared in all directions. They were saint-level demonic beasts with their mouths wide open, roaring at them fiercely. The tyrannical aura that was revealed caused everyone's expression to change. So many demon beasts? You are all beast tamers. The family forces in Wildland City and other cities all looked at the young man and his group in shock. These people were all beast tamers. They were people from the hidden world. Oomph. The young man sneered and flew up to the head of a multicolored sacred tiger, looking down at the shocked people of the family forces below. That's right, we are from the Beast Tamer Valley. We are from the hidden world. You have piqued my interest. He looked coldly in the direction of Suyu. You can actually resist the beast taming art from our Beast Tamer Valley. The contract technique you used is definitely not ordinary. He waved his hand as he spoke. Take them all away. I want to interrogate them properly. He wanted the beast taming art and Yijio's whereabouts. He did not believe that the other party could withstand his many methods. In their Beast Tamer Valley, there were many ways to torture people. He could guarantee that he would make these people spill the whole truth. Suyu and the others were all restrained and taken away. When it was Chu Lingfeng's turn, the group of Beast Tamer Valley people all frowned. The other party's body was covered in blood. It was unknown what kind of vines had pierced through his body. At this moment, he looked like he was on the verge of death. None of them wanted to seek trouble with that person. They immediately looked at the young man and said, "Senior brother, this person seems to be dead for sure. We don't need to bring him along, right?" Yes. The young man glanced at Chu Lingfeng and immediately concluded that he wouldn't be able to survive. He immediately said in a deep voice, "Just leave him there." The other party was so heavily injured. If he wasn't bitten to death by ferocious beasts following the scent of blood, then he would slowly die on his own. There was no need to pay attention to him at all. The crowd abandoned Chu Lingfeng and immediately took Suyu and the others away. The latter were all knocked unconscious and carried on the backs of a group of demonic beasts. Then the demonic beasts rushed forward. That was where they would stay. As for the savage city, they would not go there. The young man found out that the identity of the young man called Yijio was very mysterious. Not only did he have the protection of the Southern Region King, but he also had the protection of the Dark Colosseum. And Suyu and the others had just called out the name of the Black Field. Regardless of whether the other party was speaking the truth or not, they were not as wanton in the Sky Spill continent as they were in the hidden world. The young man absolutely would not allow any mishaps to occur when he took back the amethyst heart fruit and the thunder beast. Chapter 1546. The wilderness in the far west wilderness was quite suitable for them to settle down. They would leave immediately after they interrogated the contract method and Yi Jiu's whereabouts, and obtained the purple heart enlightened fruit. So what if the people from the dark arena and the black field came to find trouble with them? The other party might not know that they were the ones who attacked. When they finally succeeded, they would definitely kill the group of people in their hands. And the young man called Yi Jiu. The young man's face was cold, and his eyes were cold and fierce. After they left, Chu Lingfeng, who was motionless like a corpse, struggled to get up at this moment. Master, mother. His eyes were blood red, and Hu Yinyang's voice echoed in his mind. Feng, or don't move. No matter what, don't move. Pretend that you are dying. Then, go to the black field. Find the Lord to save master. Don't care about mother. Did you hear that? Otherwise, I won't recognize you as my son. Master, mother. Chu Lingfeng's eyes were filled with tears of blood. He struggled to get up, and tore off the vines on his body one by one. Even though he was in so much pain that his whole body was twitching and screaming, he refused to stop. He lay on the ground and crawled little by little in the direction of the wild city. Master, master, save master, save mother. Chu Lingfeng's mouth was full of blood foam. The blood spilled all over the ground, dragging a long and thick blood trail under his body. In the secret chamber, Luo Qingtong poured her blood, and the death aura of the life and death soared into the blood-red flower. The latter's petals opened little by little. Soon the entire sage land flower bloomed. The rich essence of blood and qi was emitted from it. This blood-red flower was formed by the infusion of blood and qi of death. But because it was the condensation of essence, the entire sage land flower didn't look bloody and dark at all. That blooming blood-red color was as bright and translucent as a red agate, extremely translucent. There was even a hint of holiness in it. This Saint Realm flower already contained a trace of the Great Path's law, and could help one enter the Saint Realm directly. And he had no worries at all. Luo Qingtong looked at the blooming flower, and plucked it before putting it into her mouth. Buzz! As the Holy Land flower entered his body, in an instant Luo Qingtong's aura began to surge violently. At this moment, all the energy in her meridians was filled to the brim with the essence of the saint flower, and it quickly turned into her own energy. At the same time, the sage flower contained a trace of the power of the Great Way, and the comprehension of the laws. With a boom, it entered Luo Qingtong's mind. In an instant, a blood-red light appeared above Luo Qingtong's head. Then with a boom, the aura of her entire body surged out violently in an instant. Above her head, a brilliant rosy light was formed. The surrounding spiritual qi of heaven and earth involuntarily resonated and trembled with the power that surged out in an instant. The power of the Saint Realm, the full primordial realm. At this moment, Luo Qingtong's spiritual consciousness seemed to have merged with the earth and space. From now on, there was no distinction between them. Chapter 1547. With a swoosh, Luo Qingtong's eyes suddenly opened. The blood-red light in her eyes swirled like a knife. It was like the world's most resplendent jewel, and the most gorgeous jade. She had reached the Saint Realm. Luo Qingtong raised her hand, and took out the manual that she had put away before. After reaching the Saint Realm, she still needed to cultivate a martial art technique and cultivation method. The martial art technique that she had learned from the martial emperor of the Tianyu Empire was no longer useful to her. If she only had Yi Qianxian's heaven-conquering art, it would be too monotonous. Most importantly, as her strength increased in the future, she would use this heaven-conquering art more often, and it would inevitably be exposed. The man's move was so powerful that it was better to use it as a trump card. She hadn't found a suitable cultivation method or martial art technique before, so she frequently used the man's move. But now that she had this manual, she didn't have to worry so much. Thinking so, Luo Qingtong immediately raised her hand and opened the manual. It recorded all kinds of cultivation methods and martial arts techniques of various stages. Luo Qingtong didn't look at anything else, only staring at the pages from the Saint Realm to the Sage Realm. the cultivation methods and martial arts techniques of the Saint Realm, and beyond were a little weak for her. Luo Qingtong carried the blood pupil technique, and her strength was incomparably strong. Plus, she had the life and death yin-yang sword in her hand. If she really used her full strength, ordinary Saint Realm experts were no match for her at all. Only the peak experts of the Saint Realm could barely resist her. Similarly, it was the same for those who had surpassed the Saint Realm. Luo Qingtong could tie with ordinary experts who had surpassed the Saint Realm, or even suppress them. And only the experts who had surpassed the Saint Realm could barely suppress her. And this was also the case that Luo Qingtong hadn't used the heaven-conquering art yet. So with such strength, how could Luo Qingtong learn cultivation methods and martial arts techniques of these two realms? Her eyes were naturally placed on the saints and sacred experts a level above. Luo Qingtong's gaze lingered on the manual. Soon she took a fancy to a cultivation method and martial skill. Bloody cross slash. Luo Qingtong looked at the name of this cultivation method and martial skill and smiled. What an interesting name. Moreover, the power and effect were very much in line with Luo Qingtong's requirements. Buzz! The blood-red pupils in her eyes were activated. In the blink of an eye, Luo Qingtong imprinted the martial technique demonstration diagrams on the secret manuals into her bloody eyes. In Luo Qingtong's eyes, the martial techniques were continuously broken down and evolved. In the next second, Luo Qingtong's figure suddenly flew up. Blood cross slash. The life and death yin-yang sword in her hand was split into two, and held in Luo Qingtong's hand. Life on one side, death on the other. Luo Qingtong brandished her long sword. In the next second, two saber lights, one black and one white, carrying boundless blood-red and fierce light, swept forward violently. The two sword lights, one above the other, formed a huge cross in the air. Then, carrying an incomparably violent and fierce blood-red aura, it rushed forward with a power that surpassed the Saint Realm. Boom! 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 The entire secret room trembled faintly. Smoke and dust filled the air, and fog filled the air. The stone table in front of her was suddenly deeply imprinted by Luo Qingtong's double sword cross slash. Very good. Luo Qingtong's lips curled up slightly. She put away the life and death yin-yang sword in her hand. She was very satisfied with the power of this move. If an ordinary person who had surpassed the Saint Realm was here, he would have been killed by her, right? Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong immediately walked to the wall where the formation was hidden. Chapter 1548. She raised her hand and pressed her palm against the wall with a bang, injecting the energy in her body into it. Buzz! After a series of tremors, a hidden array formation suddenly appeared on the wall. As Luo Qingtong's energy poured in, the lines of the array lit up one by one. Then with a bang, Luo Qingtong's figure was wrapped in a dazzling white light. In the next second, her figure disappeared from the secret chamber. The far west wilderness, the wilderness, less than 200 meters away from the Saint King's tomb. Chu Lingfeng's figure was moving on the ground with difficulty. His speed was getting slower and slower. His body was surrounded by blood, and it was accumulating more and more. With such serious injuries, if it were anyone else, they would have died. But Chu Lingfeng relied on his powerful body's regenerative ability to hold on until now. But he was about to reach his limit. No, he couldn't die. He couldn't die. He still had to go to the Black Field, to find the Lord to save his master and mother. Chu Lingfeng's gaze was fixed in the direction of the wild city. There. As long as he reached there, he could get someone to inform the people in the Black Field, and he could save his master and mother. His figure was moving on the ground with all his might. At this moment, roar! A series of sharp and ear-piercing howls suddenly came from behind him. A series of ferocious-looking demonic beasts appeared from behind the mound not far behind him. Those pairs of green eyes looked in his direction greedily and covetously. Warriors. Warriors with a large amount of blood and chi essence in their bodies. It was their favorite delicacy. Not only could it fill their stomachs, but it could also increase their strength. Roar! One after another the ferocious howls came. More and more ferocious beasts followed the scent of the large amount of blood flowing out of Chu Lingfeng's body. They looked at him greedily and covetously as they slowly walked over. Roar! Listening to the low growls coming from their mouths, Chu Lingfeng's face was filled with despair. Master, mother, I'm sorry. He grabbed the turf under him fiercely and tried to stand up, but he couldn't. He was too badly injured. He had already done his best to stay alive. It was impossible for him to fight again. Just as Chu Lingfeng's face was filled with despair, streaks of white light lit up in the sky above where the Saint King's tomb had collapsed. Luo Qingtong's figure appeared from it. Swoosh! Luo Qingtong's figure. With a light tap of her foot in the air, she spun around and flew to an open space on the side. Su Yu and the others have already left? Luo Qingtong looked at the place where the underground palace collapsed was located. There were obvious traces there. Obviously, Su Yu and the others wanted to save her, but they couldn't do anything. Could it be that they had left to look for reinforcements? Luo Qingtong only had to think to guess what Su Yu and the others were thinking at that time. Her heart warmed slightly, and she turned to leave. At this moment, her eyes suddenly swept across the scene next to her, and instantly froze. She looked at the thick blood trail that Chu Lingfeng had crawled out, and fixed her gaze on the blood-colored vines that had been discarded around. Chapter 1549. Obviously, it was pulled out from his body by force. Chu Lingfeng. Luo Qingtong immediately thought of Chu Lingfeng, and her expression changed instantly. Not for other reasons, but because Chu Lingfeng was so seriously injured, Su Yu and the others would definitely not leave him alone. Not to mention that they pulled out the vines from his body so simply and violently. Not good. Luo Qingtong's expression turned cold. Su Yu and the others are in trouble. Swish. Her figure swept towards the place where Chu Lingfeng was crawling. At this moment, those salivating beasts suddenly launched an attack after discovering that Chu Lingfeng, a delicacy in their eyes, had no power to fight back. Roar. Their voices roared, and their figures swept out in an instant, biting fiercely towards Chu Lingfeng. Their bloody mouths were full of disgusting saliva and sharp, cold teeth. Their figures swept violently, and in an instant, they appeared beside Chu Lingfeng, biting and tearing him apart. At this moment, a slender and weak figure appeared beside Chu Lingfeng in an instant faster than them. Clang! A demonic beast that was the first to rush in front of Chu Lingfeng and bite him was suddenly stopped in its mouth by a sharp and cold sword. With a crunch, it bit down on the body of the long sword. In the next second, the long sword suddenly waved. Blood cross slash. As this incomparably cold and sharp voice sounded, in an instant, the long sword suddenly bloomed with thousands of brilliance. A huge blood-red cross suddenly flew out. The cross spun, as sharp as a knife. In an instant, the ferocious beasts that were pouncing towards Chu Lingfeng were all sent flying by the sword. The sound was sharp, resounding, and incomparably mournful. Bang, bang, bang. The surroundings were full of exploded flesh and blood and broken corpses. Luo Qingtong stood in the rain of blood with a sword in her hand. She was stunning and domineering, and her eyes were sharp. Buzz! The life and death dual rights sword in her hand hummed and trembled slightly, making the bloody land around her look like a hellish azure field. Get lost! Luo Qingtong's voice was cold, and her sharp eyes swept across the remaining beasts around her. Those beasts did not dare to stay any longer. Based on the keen intuition of beasts, they could feel that the youth in front of them was very dangerous. A group of beasts quickly retreated with their tails between their legs. Luo Qingtong hurriedly squatted down and helped Chu Lingfeng up. Chu Lingfeng, what's going on? Where are Su Yu and the others? Luo Qingtong raised her hand and sealed several of his acupoints, forcibly forcing out the potential of his life from his body. She then raised her hand and fed him a bottle of medicinal pills. When she appeared, the latter's eyes were already red with excitement. Tears of blood continued to fall from his eyes. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. His injuries were so serious that he did not even have the strength to speak. It was not until Luo Qingtong gave him a bottle of medicinal pills and treated him a little that Chu Lingfeng recovered. Master! Save! He tightly grasped Luo Qingtong's hand and stared in the direction that the group of people from Beast Taming King's Valley left. Suyu, mother. Beast Taming King's Valley. Chapter 1550. I got it. Luo Qingtong looked at the direction he was looking at, and the bloody light in her eyes, layer after layer, with an incomparably cold and murderous aura, surrounded him. She raised her hand to summon Snowball, and let it take Chu Lingfeng back to the wild city to receive treatment and recuperation. Then she lifted the long sword in her hand, and flew in the direction Chu Lingfeng was looking at. Beast Taming King Valley? A transcendent sect in the hidden world that almost no one dared to provoke? Luo Qingtong thought of the words Yu Si Huang had said to her about Beast Taming King Valley, and the bloody light in her eyes became more and more piercingly cold. If the other party dared to touch her people, not to mention Beast Taming King Valley, even if it was the Heavenly Emperor, she would still kill without hesitation. Luo Qingtong's figure swept forward quickly. The information that Chu Lingfeng said was very incomplete. If it was someone else, it would naturally be very difficult to find the traces of those people. But for Luo Qingtong, it was not very difficult. The bloody pupil in her eyes opened. The surrounding scene, at an extremely fast speed, retreated in her eyes. Time and space backtracking. Luo Qingtong's supreme eye technique could backtrack the scene that had happened before in a short time. In the past, her strength was not enough, and she could not use it unscrupulously. But now, her strength had broken through to the sage realm, and her spiritual power had also been greatly enhanced. When he used this eye technique, he could rewind more scenes in time. Swish! Luo Qingtong's eyes reflected everything around her. The scenes and images inside flashed past her eyes, as if she was looking at flowers on horseback. Soon, she found the past scenes of Suyu and the others. Watching those people from Beast Taming King Valley knock them all out, tied them on the back of the demon beast, and took them away, Luo Qingtong's eyes became colder and colder. Especially when she heard that the leading young man wanted to force out her whereabouts, and Suyu's method of contracting the thunder beast by reading his lips. The murderous intent in Luo Qingtong's eyes seemed to burst out like a real substance. Her figure was incomparably fast, and she chased after the group of people from Beast Taming King Valley. After Luo Qingtong left, Chu Lingfeng, who was carried on Snowball's back, suddenly remembered something. He forgot to tell Luo Qingtong about the strength of the group of people from Beast Taming King Valley. Not good. Master is in danger. Chu Lingfeng was anxious. He struggled to sit up on Snowball's back and patted it. No, you can't do that. Quick. We're not going to Wild City. Take me to the nearest Blackfield city. He was going to find Ming Zun to save Luo Qingtong. That group of people from Beast Taming King Valley were all Sage Realm cultivators. There was also a group of contracted demon beasts. Not only that, the leading young man was also a Sage Realm cultivator. It's too dangerous for Master to rush there so rashly. Chu Lingfeng thought so. And in an instant, his heart was filled with anger and anxiety. His eyes were blood red, and there was no way for him to forgive himself. What if something happened to Master? He anxiously patted Snowball's back, and the wound that Luo Qingtong had just stopped bleeding burst open. Blood from the wound splashed out, and Snowball's snow-white fur was dyed blood red. The latter was somewhat hesitant, not knowing whether to listen to him or Luo Qingtong. But soon, it chose to listen to Chu Lingfeng. Chapter 1551. The little Snowball turned around and headed for the nearest city in the Blackfield Citadel. Under its feet, its four hooves stirred up the wind, and its speed was extremely fast. It was practically as fast as lightning as it flew towards the nearest city of the Black region. While Chu Lingfeng and Snowball were rushing towards the nearest city in the Black Field, Luo Qingtong had also caught up with the group of people from Beast Taming King's Valley. After those people took Suyu and the others to the depths of the wilderness of the Western Wilderness for some distance, they put them down. After all, there were very few people who could enter the depths of the wildlands. The demonic beasts ran amok in the surroundings, and they would attack any cultivators they saw. However, the people from Beast Taming King's Valley had contracted demonic beasts as mounts, and the demonic beasts were extremely powerful. As a result, the demonic beasts in the wildlands all avoided them from a distance. Beasts had the ability to turn good luck into bad luck. Sensing the strength of the demonic beasts contracted by the people from beast-taming King's Valley, they would not deliberately provoke them. Therefore, the people from beast-taming King's Valley did not have to worry about encountering danger here. Not to mention meeting other people here and bumping into them. Now you can tell me where that Yijio is. Also, where did you learn your method of beast taming? The young man ordered to put Su Yu and the rest down, and at the same time, he ordered people to wake Su Yu and the rest up. He walked in front of Su Yu and raised his hand to pinch her chin, forcing her to raise her head. Stop dreaming. I won't tell you. Su Yu's gaze was cold. From the other party's words, she could tell that the method Master used to help her contract the Thunder Beast was definitely not simple. These people originally wanted to find trouble with Master. How could she tell them the origin of this method of contract and make them even more unfavorable to Master? These people must be dreaming. Su Yu's gaze was full of contempt. The disdain and coldness hidden in her gaze caused the young man's face to darken. Good. You're good. He sneered and tightened his grip on Su Yu's neck. It almost broke Su Yu's jaw. I hope you're still as stubborn as before. As he spoke, he said to the people around him, Bring me my tools of torture. At this moment, he swept his gaze around and suddenly saw the scene in front of Su Yu. Then he laughed. Haha, I didn't expect you to be a woman. As soon as he said that, Su Yu's expression changed. She lowered her head and saw a large patch of wet clothes clinging to her chest. It was the water that these people had splashed on her. The water had soaked her clothes and exposed her tightly wrapped bosom. The woman's identity was immediately exposed. All right. The young man sneered at her and said, That saves me a lot of trouble. As he spoke, his gaze swept over Su Yu's face with evil intentions. Looking at your appearance, you're still a virgin. He sneered at Su Yu and said, I'll give you one last chance. Tell me the whereabouts of Yijio, and tell me where you got your method of beast taming. Otherwise, I don't mind letting you know what it's like to have many men. As he spoke, he called all the male disciples of the beast-taming King Valley outside. If they're not enough, there are many contracted demonic beasts outside. Chapter 1552. You. Hearing the young man's words, Su Yu's face turned pale. The people behind her from the family, Hu and the heavenly diabolism, were also furious. You're all shameless. Hu Yenyang and the others shouted in a stern voice. Su Yu was actually a woman. They didn't expect this at all. Other than in front of Luo Qingtong, Su Yu's identity as a woman had always been well hidden. It wasn't that she was deliberately hiding it, but that she was used to being treated as a man. Her movements were no different from a man's. There was not a single trace of femininity on that handsome and beautiful face. Those who had come into contact with her wouldn't have thought that she was actually a woman. Even Hu Yinyang didn't know Su Yu's true identity. Now that her gender had been exposed, and that young man had used such shameless and filthy threats to threaten her, the crowd was instantly enraged. However, their anger only increased the arrogance in the young man's heart. Very angry? That's right. The young man sneered. He wasn't afraid of these people being angry. The angrier they were, the better. Being angry meant that they couldn't accept this kind of punishment. Let's see how long the other party can keep up this stubbornness. As he thought of this, he looked at Su Yu with more and more malicious and cold eyes. Everyone come here. He raised his hand, and the male disciples of the beast-taming King's Valley immediately gathered around, looking at Su Yu with lustful eyes. The young girl's face was cold and full of heroic spirit, like a piece of superior cold jade. After revealing her identity as a woman, it added a trace of seductive and charming aura. Her clothes were wet, and her cold and stubborn expression was set off by others. That abstinent and seductive appearance could very well arouse the desire of others to abuse her. At least now, many of the male disciples of the beast-taming King's Valley were getting restless. Under the young man's command, the male contracted demonic beasts were also brought over. They surrounded Su Yu, constantly roaring and pacing. These contracted demonic beasts once fed with catalyzing drugs, would immediately become ferocious beasts in heat. Suyu's face turned even paler when she saw the beast-taming King Valley's people and beasts closing in on her. That heroic and stubborn face was so pale that it was almost transparent. However, her heart did not waver in the slightest. She recalled the scene when she was taken away by Luo Qingtong from the Blackfield slave market. The girl with the silver ghost face Rakshasa said to her in a low voice, "Remember, from now on, I am your master." Master. Suyu closed his eyes tightly. Back then, she was unruly and arrogant like a wolf. He originally thought that he would die in the Blackfield slave market. After all, she didn't want to be discovered as a woman and trampled on after being redeemed. She didn't want to die without dignity. Therefore, in the Blackfield slave market, she was unscrupulous and did not listen to anyone's orders. She only wanted a quick death. However, Luo Qingtong's appearance changed her. The evil young man, who was called the evil Dr. Ghost, I was actually a young girl. The moment Suyu opened her mouth and revealed her true voice, she recognized the other party as her master. After all, falling into the hands of such a young girl was better than falling into the hands of those disgusting men, wasn't it? However, her master changed her life. Chapter 1553. Master, Suyu has no regrets in this life. I hope to be able to serve under you again in my next life, and continue to repay your kindness. As Suyu thought of this, she suddenly opened her eyes and looked at the young man with a sneer. She said coldly, "Trash from the beast-taming King Valley can only use such disgusting methods. What powerful sect from the hidden world? What beast-taming master? They're just maggots that are more disgusting than trash. Come at me if you have the ability. I'm afraid that with your small bodies, you won't be able to satisfy me." Suyu's jade-like face was full of coldness and disdain. That pair of extremely beautiful and heroic phoenix eyes slanted as she looked at the young man and the others, as if they were nothing more than a group of jumping clowns. Want her to reveal everything related to her master? Even if she was humiliated to death, it was impossible. These people from the beast-taming King Valley, come at me if you have the ability. Impudent. Looking at Suyu's gaze that was like looking at a disgusting maggot, the young man who had been waiting for her to yield suddenly became angry. Good. He was so angry that he laughed. "Since you want to have a taste, I'll fulfill your wish." The young man's face was cold. Since the other party didn't know what was good for them, he didn't need to be merciful. After all, even if he tortured the other party to death, there were still so many people around. He didn't believe that the others would be as unyielding as her. This time, he would kill the chicken to warn the monkey. "Do it," the young man ordered coldly. Those male disciples of the beast-taming King Valley, who were already tempted, immediately pounced on Suyu. The lecherous look on their faces made people want to vomit. Suyu, Hu Yinyang and the others violently struggled. However, their bodies were restrained by the young man's aura, and they couldn't break free. They could only watch with tears in their eyes as those people pounced on Suyu. At this moment, a voice suddenly came from behind them. "You're courting death by touching my people." As the voice rang out, a sword light suddenly flew out and slashed towards the young man and the others. "Spread out." The young man instantly frowned when he sensed the sword light flying over. Then he shouted in a stern voice. Yes, the group of beast-taming King's Valley members, who were surrounding Suyu, immediately scattered in all directions. The sword light immediately blasted towards Suyu, who was exposed in the middle. However, just as the sword light was about to hit Suyu, another sword light suddenly chased after her from behind. In an instant, it caught up with the previous sword light. Boom! The two sword lights collided in midair. In the blink of an eye, they vanished into thin air. Amidst the fluctuating spiritual energy of heaven and earth, a figure slowly appeared nearby. "Master." The moment the figure appeared, Suyu's eyes filled with tears. She looked at the figure who walked out from the spiritual energy of heaven and earth with a sword in his hand, and felt a wave of excitement in her heart. Then, her expression changed abruptly and she hurriedly shouted, "Master! Leave quickly! They're from the beast-taming King's Valley." They're here for the lightning beast and the amethyst jade fruit. They're also after the lightning beast's contract method. Leave quickly. Chapter 1554. Following Su Yu's voice, Hu Yinyang and the rest also looked towards the front, where the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was rampaging. When they saw Luo Qingtong's figure appear, everyone's eyes were filled with tears. But soon, they followed Su Yu's lead and started to shout, "Mistress, leave quickly! Mistress, don't worry about us." Luo Qingtong's figure walked out from the rampaging spiritual energy of heaven and earth in front of them. The youth was holding a sword, her black hair draped over her shoulders. A strand of hair on her forehead fluttered slightly, covering half of her eyes. That pair of peerless eyes revealed a fierce blood-red color, as cold as a sword and as sharp as a knife. That black robe on other people might be a little too dull and gloomy, but on her body, it revealed a peerless elegance that could topple cities. Just like a gorgeous Azura that walked out from the depths of purgatory. Just the aura on her body was enough to kill everyone. "Mistress, don't speak, back off." Luo Qingtong's voice was cold. Her gaze swept past Su Yu and the rest. When she saw the faintly discernible scenery in front of Su Yu's chest, the coldness in her eyes surged even more fiercely. She had just arrived nearby. She had heard everything the young man had said. The other party was really courting death. Bang! Luo Qingtong waved the long sword in her hand. She directly broke the aura that the young man used to imprison Su Yu, Hu Yinyang and the rest. "Everyone leave," she coldly said to Su Yu and the rest. "No, mistress, we won't leave." Su Yu looked at Luo Qingtong with tears in her eyes. How could they leave Luo Qingtong alone here to face these people from beast-taming King Valley? "Mistress, quickly leave. They're too strong. You alone." Before Su Yu could finish her words, the young man's cold voice sounded from the other side. "Leave. None of you can leave." He stared coldly at Luo Qingtong with the rest of the beast-taming King's Valley members. "You are that Yijiao." He looked at Luo Qingtong's face. Although the aura of the other party, and the people of Wild City, were different from what he had described. However, to be able to make Su Yu and the others so nervous, to the point where they repeatedly called out for their master, and urged the other party to leave quickly. Clearly, they had found the right person. This young man should be Yijiao. Very good. The young man sneered. He had no idea how the other party had found him. However, since they had captured so many people, it was normal for her to track some of them. Since the other party had come, then don't even think about leaving. With that thought in mind, the young man waved his hand. "Catch her. The other party must have the purple jade bright heart fruit on him." There was also that young girl named Su Yu. Wasn't she determined not to reveal the origin of the lightning beast contract technique? When they caught this young man named Yi Jiao, they didn't believe that she wouldn't give in. Following the young man's command, the young man's voice rang out. In an instant, a beast-taming King's Valley disciple with a cultivation that surpassed the sage realm flew towards Luo Qingtong. "Senior brother, let me do it." His expression was arrogant as he looked at Luo Qingtong with eyes full of disdain. The other party looked no more than 15 or 16 years old. At such an age, in the secular world of the Sky Spill continent, the most he could reach was the peak of the martial spirit realm. With such strength he could easily capture and kill him. However, just in case, he let the other party escape. Chapter 1555. Great Capturing Hand. His hands instantly shot towards Luo Qingtong like hooks. The powerful aura that poured out instantly stirred up the surrounding heaven and earth spiritual energy, causing it to violently tumble. In an instant, the wind and clouds surged, and the spiritual energy changed. "Master!" Seeing this scene, Su Yu and the others' hearts suddenly tightened. At this moment, Luo Qingtong raised her hand and slashed out with her sword. Bang! An incomparably dazzling blood-red light suddenly flew towards the Beast Tamer Valley disciple in a cross shape. It was a step faster than his attack speed and smashed into his body. In an instant, the Beast Tamer Valley disciple let out an incomparably tragic cry as he was ruthlessly sent flying by the sword light. His face was full of horror. Looking at Luo Qingtong, His eyes were no longer cold and disdainful. Only a light of disbelief remained. How was this possible? He was sent flying with a single move. His opponent's strength clearly hadn't surpassed the Saint Realm. That's right, when Luo Qingtong attacked, her Saint Realm aura had already been revealed without reservation. Looking at the youth floating in the air with a powerful aura, the young man and the others' complexions all changed. Saint Realm, a 15 or 16-year-old Saint Realm powerhouse. Even among the super sects in the hidden world, the other party's potential could be ranked at the top. Not to mention that this youth had sent a Saint Realm powerhouse flying with a single sword strike. The Beast Tamer Valley disciple just now couldn't be considered strong amongst those who had surpassed the Saint Realm, but he could be considered above average. But he had actually been sent flying with a single sword strike. Seeing his own junior brother vomit blood as he was sent flying and heavily smashed into the ground, unconscious in an instant, the young man's face became solemn. All of you attack together. We can't let him escape. The young man's complexion was dignified. With this youth's strength, he even suspected that this youth had come from their hidden world and had concealed his identity to gain experience in the mortal world of the Sky Spill continent. Even if this wasn't the case, the influence behind this youth couldn't be underestimated. If that was the case, then he couldn't let the other party escape. Otherwise, the consequences would be endless. With that thought in mind, the young man waved his sleeves decisively. He released all the energy in his body, enveloping Suyu's group and suppressing them. They were not allowed to act recklessly. Otherwise, these people would be too eager to protect their master and ruin their plans, letting Luo Qingtong escape. At the same time, the disciples of Beast Taming King's Valley gathered together and attacked Luo Qingtong. Boom! Everyone displayed their strength, and the aura around them surged, causing the surrounding heaven and earth spirit chi to tremble. They didn't use their contracted demonic beasts. In their opinion, with so many of them, it was enough to deal with Luo Qingtong. So what if the other party's talent and strength were even more powerful? Sage Realm experts might be able to stop those who had surpassed the Sage Realm. But could they stop so many of them? Not to mention, they still hadn't found out the whereabouts of the Purple Heart Fruit and the origin of the Thunder Beast contract technique. They still needed to leave Luo Qingtong alive. If they used their contracted demonic beasts, their attacks would be too strong. What if they weren't careful enough and accidentally killed the other party? Chapter 1556. Their attacks bombarded Luo Qingtong one after another. 7 to 8 consecutive attacks. Unless there was a Saint Realm expert present, there was no way to dodge them. Suyu and the others struggled with all their might under the young man's suppression. Mistress! Mistress! They roared with all their might, trying to break free from the young man's restraint. However, the other party was already prepared. Under the full force of a Saint Realm expert's suppression, they felt as if they were trapped in a quagmire, unable to move at all. Just as Suyu and the others were extremely anxious and worried, Luo Qingtong glanced at the young man with a sneer on his face. Then the corners of her lips curled up. The other party's actions were exactly what she wanted, since these Beast Taming King's Valley disciples wanted to deliver food to her. Then they couldn't blame her for swinging her blade. Bang! Luo Qingtong's figure swept up in an instant. In her left hand, the heart of the 1,000-year soul-guiding tree suddenly appeared. At this moment, the power of the Saint King's soul entered Luo Qingtong's body. In an instant, the blood-colored cross in her hand shot out explosively, like a giant meat grinder. It flew towards the group of Beast Taming King's Valley disciples, who were charging towards her. What? Seeing the blood-colored light rush out in an instant, the young man's pupils instantly contracted. He could feel the powerful force contained in that attack. Luo Qingtong's attack was enough to kill all the Beast Taming King's Valley disciples. Not good. The young man's figure instantly rushed out, wanting to stop Luo Qingtong. However, it was too late. Previously, in order to prevent Suyu and the others from rescuing Luo Qingtong, he deliberately enveloped them with all his strength to suppress them. Now, even if he immediately withdrew, it would be difficult to mobilize all his strength in an instant. He hurriedly blasted out an attack, but it was shattered by Luo Qingtong's blood-colored cross. She spun in the air, and with an extremely domineering stance, she charged towards the group of beast-taming King's Valley members who were rushing towards her, intending to injure her and capture her. Bang! The ground was covered in a rain of blood. Infused with the power of the Saint King's soul, the blood-colored attack easily beheaded the beast-taming King's Valley disciples. The latter and the others didn't expect Luo Qingtong, a Saint Realm expert, to be able to display such terrifying power. They were almost unable to resist and died by the blood-colored cross. The sky was filled with flying flesh and blood and limbs. Luo Qingtong was a Saint King's swords. She held the life and death yin yang sword in her hand, the sword's hands of Life's heart. Bastard! The young man rushed over, but he couldn't catch up to Luo Qingtong's sword. He saw the beast-taming King's Valley disciples being cut into countless pieces by Luo Qingtong's blood-colored sword light. Their deaths were incomparably miserable. His eyes instantly turned blood-red. You deserve to die. He looked at Luo Qingtong with bloodshot eyes. He didn't know how Luo Qingtong could unleash such a powerful and terrifying move. But the opponent's attack was useless against him. She killed their beast-taming King's Valley disciples. So he wanted the other party to pay with blood. Chapter 1557. Bastard! I want you dead. At this moment, the purple heart fruit and the lightning beast contract method were all thrown to the back of his mind. He wanted to kill Luo Qingtong and avenge his junior brothers. As for the items, he would slowly search for them after killing them. Boom! That young man quickly attacked Luo Qingtong. At the same time, Su Yu and the others' voices sounded anxiously. Master! Be careful! He's a sage sovereign. Su Yu and the others wanted to rush up and use their bodies to block the attack for Luo Qingtong. But they were stopped by the latter. No one is allowed to come over. All of you back off. Back off far away. The other party was a sage sovereign. No matter how many Su Yu and the others came, they would all be courting death. Luo Qingtong didn't want to have to worry about them when she was facing the other party. Master! Su Yu and the others were unwilling to obey the order with tears in their eyes. Luo Qingtong's voice sounded coldly at this moment. Didn't you hear what I said? Or are you saying that my words no longer hold any weight in your hearts? All of you back off. Whoever dares to come up from now on in the world in life or in death, I will no longer recognize him. She didn't come to save them to bring back a bunch of corpses. Since these people weren't willing to cherish themselves, why should she come to save them? Master! Su Yu and the others had tears in their eyes. At this moment, Hu Yinyang's voice suddenly sounded calmly. Listen to Master's orders, back off. She gritted her teeth and said, Where there's life, there's hope. If Master is in trouble, we'll die together. Don't distract Master. Hearing her words, Su Yu and the others calmed down. They gritted their teeth and retreated far away with tears in their eyes. They looked at Luo Qingtong and the young man with worried and burning eyes. Boom, boom, boom. The moment Luo Qingtong passed the message to Su Yu and the others, the bloody light in her eyes flickered violently. She suddenly moved and dodged the other party's attack. At the same time, she slashed out the bloody cross in her hand one after another. The power in the heart of the thousand-year soul guiding would continuously entered her body and transmitted to the life and death sword in her hand. It turned into a boundless and mighty attack violently swept forward. Although these attacks couldn't do anything to the young man, it was enough to obstruct his movements. Luo Qingtong's eyes. Bastard! The young man's eyes were bloodshot. The young man's strength was strong. He was clearly only a Saint Realm expert. But his attack was so formidable that it was practically comparable to the strength of a Saint Realm expert. How did she do it? The young man was Luo's? Originally, it was 70% anger mixed with 30% murderous intent. At this moment, it was 70% murderous intent and 30% anger. The other party's strength and potential were so strange and powerful that she would definitely become a huge threat in the future. He absolutely could not let her go back alive. Bang! The young man regained his senses, and his killing intent towards Luo Qingtong intensified. After Luo Qingtong dodged another attack, His eyes were filled with coldness. You're hiding like a rat in a ditch. Let's see how you're going to hide next. Multicolored Sacred Tiger. Chapter 1558. A huge multicolored tiger suddenly jumped out from the side and rushed toward Luo Qingtong. At the same time, the young man suddenly formed a hand seal. In an instant, those dead beast tamer King's Valley disciples contracted demonic beasts obeyed his command and rushed toward Luo Qingtong. This was the tyrannical power of the beast tamer King's Valley's beast taming art. The stronger the cultivator, the higher the level of the beast taming art. They could temporarily control those weaker beast tamers' contracted demonic beasts. The beast tamer King's Valley's beast tamers had a strict hierarchy. Those weaker beast tamers didn't dare to offend or fight against those stronger than them. Roar! Under the young man's command, those contracted demonic beasts rushed toward Luo Qingtong. At the same time, the young man's figure also rushed toward Luo Qingtong. These demonic beasts attacked from all directions. Nearly 7 or 8 contracted demonic beasts rushed toward Luo Qingtong, blocking Luo Qingtong's escape route. The young man came from the front. The aura under his sleeves was abnormally fierce and fierce. As long as he blocked the opponent's escape route, he would kill the opponent. Seeing the young man and those contracted demonic beasts rushing toward her, Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed. The strength of a Saint Master was too tyrannical. If the opponent really seized the opportunity to attack her, her body wouldn't be able to withstand it. After all, although she could borrow the power of the 1,000-year soul guiding, would to temporarily increase her attack power, she was still a Saint Master. However, her strength and defense were only at the Saint realm. What should she do? Should she use that move in advance? But if that was the case, she wouldn't be able to win by surprise. If she couldn't kill him with that move, and let the opponent guard against it, it would be even more troublesome. Just when Luo Qingtong was frowning, Little Pig's voice suddenly sounded in her mind. I say, did you forget something? 9-layer exquisite pagoda. It's the demon subduing pagoda. Although you can't use its power now, it won't be a problem for you to draw out a little bit of its aura to freeze these demonic beasts. That was the 9-layer pagoda that could even suppress it. In fact, if it hadn't used a lot of power in order to kill those blood demon vines before, it would have revealed a little bit of its soul aura pressure, which would definitely scare all these beastkins to the ground. What Saint Beast? To it, Saint Beast was not even worth mentioning. The demonic beasts under its feet that helped to cut its nails were not just holy beasts, okay? Little Pig's voice, Luo Qingtong's eyes, Luo Qingtong's eyes, Luo Qingtong's eyes, suddenly flashed. Following Little Pig's instructions, she drew out a little bit of the 9-layered exquisite pagoda's aura and wrapped it in her own aura. After that, he pretended to be panic-stricken as he darted left and right within the encirclement. However, he couldn't find any way to dodge or escape. Luo looking at Luo Qingtong's actions, the young man suddenly laughed out loud and then rushed forward with a cold expression. Stop daydreaming. You can't escape. Die. While speaking, his figure had quickly approached Luo Qingtong. Then with a bang, an extremely violent and tyrannical attack blasted toward Luo Qingtong. Chapter 1559. Boom! Luo Qingtong's eyes flashed when she saw the incoming attack. The corners of her lips curled up. Good timing. The corners of her eyes flew up in an instant. At this moment, the flustered expression on her face turned into an evil and wanton one. At this moment the young man's face, which was so beautiful that it could topple cities, became incomparably wild and domineering. Boom! She released the aura of the 9-story exquisite pagoda, hidden in her mind, and froze the contract demon beasts that were rushing over and blocking her way. The next second, heaven battling art. Luo Qingtong's figure quickly swept past the young man's attack, and then brandished the life and death dual rights sword in her hand. In an instant, a breathtaking sword light that seemed to have transcended the primordial times swept out. Then, with a terrifying momentum that could directly attack the 9-story palace and destroy the world, it swept forward violently. Luo Qingtong's heaven battling art was learned from Yi Qianxian. The The man's strength was tyrannical and unparalleled in the world. Although this sword light was called the first move, it was difficult for any cultivation technique of the Saint Realm, or even higher to rival it. Luo Qingtang had met Yi Qianxian when she was in the martial general realm. After absorbing his power, she killed the supreme assassin pavilion assassin of the half-saint realm with one sword move. At that time, the heaven battling art was not even in its perfect state. At this moment, Luo Qingtang used her saint realm cultivation and the power of the Saint King's soul, in the heart of the 1,000-year-old soul guiding, would to perform the heaven battling art. It was almost a perfect demonstration of the absolute power of this move. Boom! The sword light flew toward the young man, who was rushing toward Luo Qingtang in an absolutely breathtaking and terrifying manner, full of murderous intent. The latter thought that Luo Qingtang was doomed, and was about to enjoy her final struggle. However, the arrogant and proud expression on his face froze before it could fully appear. "What? This move of yours, how is this possible?" The young man looked at Luo Qingtang's attack in shock, and didn't even notice how Luo Qingtang had dodged his attack. His face twitched violently. Then, without caring about anything else, he hurriedly retreated. The enormous power contained in this sword light was simply too terrifying. How was this possible? How was this possible? His heart was frantically scrolling through the screen. He couldn't believe that such an attack, which had made him tremble from the bottom of his heart, had been launched by a sage youth on the opposite side. The other party was merely a Saint Realm expert. How was it possible for him to launch such a terrifying attack? The young man let out a shrill cry as he retreated. Under such an attack, he couldn't even resist it. "Run! Run!" The young man's figure rapidly retreated backwards, and Luo Qingtang's figure suddenly staggered after that attack, almost losing her balance. She had just drained all the power in the heart of the 1,000-year-old soul guiding wood. This time, she must kill the other party with one blow. Luo Qingtang looked coldly at the sword light that was chasing after the young man. The latter tried his best to retreat, but this sword light came too suddenly. He had only retreated 2 steps before the sword light caught up to him. Boom! The sword light slashed his body fiercely. In an instant, the young man let out a shrill scream. Chapter 1560. Luo Qingtang's eyes suddenly narrowed. A translucent barrier suddenly rose from the young man's body, enveloping him in it and blocking Luo Qingtang's heaven-conquering art attack. The young man's blood-curdling scream came from his arm that was cut off by Luo Qingtang when he was caught off guard. He hugged the wound on his arm and looked in the direction of Luo Qingtang with hatred and horror. The opponent's attack was so powerful and fast that he didn't even have time to activate the defensive barrier on his body. One had to know that the defensive barrier on his body was a reward he received from the sect. It was a protective talisman personally bestowed by the Valley Master to activate the barrier. This barrier contained a trace of the Valley Master's power, but it couldn't be activated in time. Didn't this mean that Luo Qingtang's attack was completely capable of killing him in an instant? What kind of terrifying attack was this? A Saint Realm expert killing a Saint Realm expert? What kind of fantasy was this? The young man's face was horrified to the extreme. At the same time, his killing intent and hatred towards Luo Qingtang reached the extreme. Just a little bit more, and he would have died under his opponent's sword. He even paid the price of a hand for this. The opponent deserved to die. No matter what, he absolutely couldn't let the opponent escape. If the young man had just treated Luo Qingtang as a genius similar to those from the hidden world, he would have thought that Luo Qingtang was a genius. Now his fear and horror towards Luo Qingtang had risen to a terrifying level. He was definitely a monster that no one could hope to reach. There were so many geniuses in the hidden worlds, but none of them could reach the level of the opponent. What's more, the young man's gaze swept across the group of contracted demonic beasts that had been immobilized at some point in time, and the horror on his face deepened. His killing intent also deepened. The opponent must die. Otherwise, not only him, but also their beast-taming King Valley would be harmed. As he thought so, he suddenly released all his strength with a boom. His entire potential and strength burst out in an instant, exploding towards Luo Qingtong. That attack was more than twice as powerful as before. Seeing the attack rushing towards her, Luo Qingtong's expression turned grave. Her figure retreated rapidly. However, at this time, the contracted demonic beasts that were temporarily immobilized by the aura of the 9-layered exquisite pagoda also reacted and continued to rush towards Luo Qingtong. It just happened to seal off her escape route. Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed slightly, and she was about to make a move. At this moment, boom! A strong gust of wind suddenly swept over at this moment. It didn't seem to be very fast, but in an instant, it came from behind Luo Qingtong and blocked the young man's attack. Boom! The two attacks collided. In an instant, a series of extremely violent and shocking forces suddenly blasted out in all directions. The contracted demonic beasts that were rushing towards Luo Qingtong screamed miserably, and then were sent flying by the extremely violent shock waves. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Luo Qingtong's eyes flickered with blood-red light. She leaped, avoiding the violent shock waves, and her figure appeared not far away. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.